Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America. Of course, I'm Jack Fairchilds, filling in for Chris here on the show. Chris is, again, busy with work, but we hope to have him back. Hopefully, we'll have him back this week, but, again, with his schedule, it's always evolving. And we'll just leave it at that. That's the best way to describe it. But I know he pushed the show back to the weekend in hopes that we were going to be able to have him here, but it just didn't quite work out this week. But hopefully we'll get him back, if not this coming week, or we'll have him back the following week. I know he misses it, and I know he enjoys this show, and he's still committed to it, so we look forward to having him back real soon. But I've got a topic today that I wanted to get into, and if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to click that subscribe button, so that way you're always catching the new episodes when they drop. If you're watching us on social media, whichever page you're watching us on, if it's Senator Chris McDaniel's main page or whether it's the Midnight Riots page, make sure you're liking those pages so that way too you can get a notification when we go live. But again, there's a lot of things happening in the world today. And you may notice I'm wearing my Chicago Cubs jersey today. And it's not just because they're going for a sweep against the Red Sox today. It's mainly because I came up with an idea and I had a theme that I wanted to do today. It's inspired by something that took place last night during, of all things, the WNBA All-Star Game. Not an event I watched, but it got me to thinking about liberalism in sports and how we have seen sports become more and more infiltrated by the mainstream liberal media. Years ago, when I was hosting the Right Side radio show on traditional radio, I noticed that ESPN started having their little sub-shows that seemed to be pushing more and more liberal narrative. Of course, now, if you turn on ESPN, it's not just kind of done covertly. It is 100% wide open, true liberalism in your face all the way. You see it. Most people don't watch SportsCenter the way they used to. A lot of folks don't watch much ESPN outside of SEC football because they just can't stand being clobbered over the head with liberalism when they're trying to escape politics by turning on sports. Sports used to be a great escape. It was one of those things that could unite us. It didn't matter if you voted for Trump. It didn't matter if you voted for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. If y'all were the fan of the same team, y'all could unite together on any given Sunday or any day of the week at a ball field. It was one of those few things that we didn't have to worry about politics during. Now, yes, there's always been those who've tried to slip politics into sports. I'm not naive to say that that hasn't always been the case. But to see the mainstream media always take the leftist side or the leftist approach, whether it's transgenders being allowed to take opportunities away from young women, we never have seen it to this level. Because again, believe you me, if you turn on ESPN and they start talking about the transgender in sport, they're on the side of the confused male. They're on the side of the individual that should not be taking opportunities away from women. The same network that ran documentary after documentary celebrating the anniversary of Title IX. Again, they just can't decide which segmented group they want to really side with at any given moment. They don't understand that Title IX is now being perverse to take those same opportunities that they originally intended to grant for females in sports. They're taking them away now by having these males, biological males, decide that they're a woman, and now they get to be on the women's team. It's ridiculous, people. But that's what we have seen happen. We've seen an art form that was, for the most part, an escape, be just infiltrated by left-leaning politics. You may think it may start off innocent. You may be watching a ball game or something to that effect. And when you see it, you look up and you go, man, I'm enjoying this. And the next thing you know, the commentators get off subject, and maybe it's on Donald Trump, maybe it's on an election beat, maybe it's just on a topic of the day that does not fit in the context of the sports, but they throw it out there and give you a take. Because again, they understand you might be their most captive audience because you're not watching for them. You're watching for your team. You're watching for your sport. You're not going to change the channel as quickly because, again, you want to see if the Chicago Cubs can pull off a sweep of the Red Sox. You want to see if your New Orleans Saints can win this close game. So they'll slip that in. It's just real simple. It's real covert. Now, back to what I was talking about before when it comes to the WNBA last night. They had an all-star game. I know, I didn't realize it was being played last night either. And folks, apparently these women showed up for the pregame shoot-around wearing T-shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us." Sounds simple enough. These women feel like they deserve more money because they're providing an entertainment. They're playing a game for a living, and they feel like they deserve more money. And, of course, the national media is taking it and running with it and trying to portray the fact that they're being underpaid. They're trying to paint a picture that because the NBA players are paid extraordinary amounts, that the women deserve the same thing. And look, we can get into a whole nother topic about are professional athletes overpaid? And the answer is 100% yes. But that's not the topic for this one. The simple fact of the matter is these women are claiming they're not being paid what they're worth. But if you go and you look at the history of the WNBA as a league, it has never, in its entire existence, turned a profit. Not once. Not once have they turned a profit as a league. There are estimates for the 2024 season that suggested that the league could have lost around $50 million. That's not a small chunk of change, people. And yet here these women are out there saying that pay us what you owe us. Well, it sounds like because you're not generating revenue, what you're owed is a pink slip. Because again, you're not putting folks together. Now, every article you go and Google will tell you about how there's a surge in popularity and the league is growing. No, there's a surge in popularity of Caitlin Clark, the superstar that the same league hates. The person who could potentially get their revenues up, make them turn a profit, and allow all these other women to get more money. But this notion that these T-shirts, that they are owed more. How are you owed more when your league is not turning a profit? And last year looked to lose $50 million. It's hard to make that claim. You may ask yourself the question, how is it the WNBA is still surviving if it's not turning a profit? Well, it's simple. It's propped up by the NBA. The NBA puts the money into the WNBA's coffers. That's how it still exists. It is basically a welfare sports league. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's a sports league that wouldn't exist, wouldn't still be able to operate if it wasn't for a welfare state granted to them by their big brother league, the NBA. Now, look, I'm not an NBA fan, but I'm just giving you facts. It's estimated that the WNBA has, on an average, lost over $10 million a year since it's existed. So again, ladies, tell me what you're owed. Tell me what you're owed. It sounds to me like you owe the NBA money. Maybe you should just shut up and go play the game, because guess what? You're not going to get more money unless you start to raise your revenue, turn a profit. If I went to my boss, Jim Zagelski, tomorrow and looked him at him, and Jim, tells us all that, hey, and this isn't true, the paper's doing fine, but let's say he came in tomorrow and said, look, paper's doing terrible. We're not turning a profit. We got to work hard to get back where we need to be. If I then turned around and heard that message and looked at him and said, Jim, I need a raise, he would laugh in my face, justifiably. He might tell me to get out because obviously I'm tone deaf and not understanding financial problems or ramifications because of such. In the real world, when companies never turn a profit, they go out of business. Not only do they go out of business, people get fired, people get laid off, they get pushed out. But the WNBA ladies, they believe that they need to be paid what they're owed. This reminds me, too, of the whole debacle with the U.S. women's national soccer team when they were running around demanding more pay. They wanted it to be equal to the men, similar to the argument here. And, of course, more people bought into it because, again, the liberal media pushed the narrative that they were being underpaid. But what the liberal media never told you was how fewer games the women's national team were playing than the men. They weren't being paid by a salary less than the men, actually. They just weren't playing as many games, and the money was done for the game days. So when they were able to force a little bit more money, they're getting paid technically more than the men, who are playing a heck of a lot more than the women. That's something they didn't want to tell you. They just wanted to make it sound like it was being unfair, that somehow sexism played a part. And ESPN and all those sports outlets pushed that narrative, and most of you fell for it. I don't fault you for falling for it because it's easy, especially when you've turned on sports media and you're not accustomed to the fact that they are left-leaning, that they are pushing a leftist narrative. You don't understand that, so you're not doing any research. But when you pull back the curtain and you do just a little bit of research and you understand, the women weren't asking for equal pay. They were asking for more pay. They were asking for more. Look, they're a successful team. I get it. They do draw decent crowds, but at the same time, your argument in your request was fundamentally dishonest. Similar to the WNBA right now. When you put that out, it makes it sound like you're not being paid what you deserve. Technically, you're being overpaid. You're being overpaid because you're not putting forth the performance that would garner the amount of money you're getting paid. And even though it does pale in comparison to your NBA cousins, you're still getting paid a lot more than a lot of us normal people who have real jobs and aren't just being paid to play a game. I think they're ungrateful, quite frankly. I think they're an ungrateful bunch, and they've always been ungrateful. And now, let's talk for a second, too, about Caitlin Clark. Because, again, here's a generational talent, a woman that comes on the scene that actually has piqued interest. If you turn on a game, if you turn on the channel and you see that the Indiana Fever are playing and Caitlin Clark is on the court, you might actually watch that game. Before she came along, if the WNBA was on, you were going to flip the channel. Unless you're one of the 4 or 5 people who actually enjoyed the WNBA. God bless you if you are, to each their own. But most people weren't watching until Caitlin Clark got drafted. And yet, this league that has struggled since its existence, has been propped up by NBA welfare, continues to just spit in her face. They allow her to get roughed up during games, hard fouls. They take shots at her. Other players are constantly taking shots at her. It's almost as if the NBA doesn't understand, or the WNBA doesn't understand what it has in her. They don't understand that she could be their ticket to getting more money. Because I can promise you this, no matter how much other players like Angel Reese or whoever it is want to try to tell you that people watch for me too. No, they're not. They're watching for her. They're watching for Caitlin. And another illustration, because again, we talked about the silly t-shirts that they had, but apparently, and Caitlin Clark was one of the ones wearing one of the t-shirts. She's not above criticism just because you like her, but she went along with her fellow WNBA players, probably hoping to get some of them to lay off of her and maybe understand that she's one of them, part of the league. Caitlin Clark from the Midwest, white woman, straight. So, of course, she's hated by a league that, loves gay, lesbian athletes, that is predominantly black. They don't like the fact that she comes in instantly is going to be the face of the league. So they continue to take swipes at her. Well, WNBA vet and four-time All-Star Kelsey Plum apparently is another one of those who said that apparently Caitlin Clark was not very present, is how she worded it, in Saturday morning's meeting when the players were planning to wear the t-shirt. She said not to be a tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that. So again, and of course, another member, rolled her eyes, but said that really needed to be mentioned. So apparently, Sabrina Inaksu, I believe, I'm butchering that name. She apparently understood that was a stupid thing. But again, it just goes to illustrate how much she's disliked. And it's simply because of politics that she's disliked. Not Caitlin's particular politics. It's the left-leaning brand of identity politics. We've seen leagues protect star players before. It happens. Then maybe they change a rule. Maybe they tell the refs, hey, that's Michael Jordan. Maybe you let him get away with a little bit more, and if somebody breathes, you give him a foul. It's LeBron James. If he flops, we know it's a flop. Needs to be a foul. He's the face of the league. We've seen that type of stuff. We know it happens. Nothing like that in the WNBA. Instead, they just continue to allow her to be hard fouled, and we'll hit her with technical fouls. And it's crazy to me because here's your golden goose. You've got it. It's there. And you're like, nope, we don't want it. We don't want it. We'll figure out on it. We'll just wear t-shirts. They pay us what you owe us. Everything will be fine. It's not going to be fine. Because when you're already a struggling league too, folks don't want to see that type of messaging. And it's going to turn folks off. And this is your biggest stage. It's your all-star game. And that's what the players chose to do. It just continues to show how tone-deaf and stupid they are. Because whoever came up with that idea, it was a bad idea. But, I mean, it's not just stuff like that with the WNBA or the women's national soccer team that show us where liberalism has creeped into sports. Earlier this week, ESPN held their award show that they call the ESPYs. It is essentially like an Oscars-style award show for sports. It's not something I find very entertaining most of the time because I don't like award shows. Award shows are basically self-congratulatory, pat yourself on the back nonsense that I don't care for. I understand why they're there. I understand why people celebrate it. I myself, now that I'm in journalism, if I'm nominated or if I'm winning an award, I'm sure I will show up and want to be a part of it. I understand the appeal. It's just not necessarily my favorite thing. But this week they had a popular comedian named Shane Gillis. That name may sound familiar to you, and I'll come back to where you might have heard it before if you're not someone who follows comedy. But Shane Gillis was the host, and he skewered everyone. I mean, I again, didn't watch it live, but I have watched a lot of his monologue and clips of different things he did. And it was hilarious. Wouldn't you know it, though? The left-leaning media has already got its talons out for him. He was sexist. He was homophobic. He was this. He was that. You got to attack Shane. Even though he's a comedian, and comedy sometimes is supposed to be offensive. I mean, they're supposed to push boundaries. But nothing he said was that boundary pushing. It was just funny. It was just funny. Now, if you're asking yourself, and you're not somebody who follows comedy, you may be at, who is Shane Gillis? Shane Gillis is a stand-up comedian. He also stars on a Netflix show called Tires. And he also does one of the funniest spot-on impersonations of Donald Trump I've ever seen. Pretty hilarious how he does it. But Shane Gillis, he was probably most well-known for being fired by Saturday Night Live because they found some of his old sketches to be too insensitive, too intolerant. So they fired him before he ever even got started on there. But of course, he's since come on and hosted the show twice. So I guess they got over that. But my point is, you know what you're going to get when you hire a Shane Gillis to host your show. You know that you're going to get a guy that's going to push boundaries. You know you're going to get a guy that doesn't really care if he offends you. He didn't write all the jokes. Even the ones he didn't write, he was pretty clear to let you know in that monologue, I didn't write this one. But he did write a large portion of them, you could tell. He had one bit during the show in which he introduced a 4-time WNBA All-Star who he then went on to say, I'm just kidding, that's my friend's wife. I knew you folks didn't watch the WNBA. And it was hilarious because the crowd all applauded for the woman, even though, again, it was just his buddy's wife who has never played in the WNBA. Did it to prove a point, which goes back to prove a point I was talking about just a second ago. But of course, the outrage is there. People are mad at Shane Gillis because he had the audacity to poke fun. He poked fun at everyone. He had some Donald Trump jokes in there, which I'm sure if that had been all it was, the left would be applauding the fact that he had Donald Trump jokes in there. He had Aaron Rodgers and his vaccine skepticism jokes, which, again, I'm sure they'd applaud that too. Took shots at Caitlin Clark. Again, left loves that. Took shots at Bill Belichick's relationship with the much younger woman. I'm sure they were starting to get a little antsy there because, again, I don't know if we want to be treading on that, Then Shohei Ohtani and his disgraced interpreter. Now they're starting to really back because, he's Asian. We probably don't need to make fun. Then he brought up Shedeur Sanders having his number retired. Sure they didn't like that. It was a great joke where he said that it wasn't nepotism. He went 13-12 and as a starter for Colorado and almost won the Alamo Bowl. So, of course, he should have his number retired. It's a great line. But, again, Shedeur's a minority. Can't really make those jokes about minorities. So that's one of the funniest hosts that they've had in a long time. It actually got me to turn on or at least go and seek out the monologue because, again, I wanted to see what folks were fussing about. XVESPN reporter Sarah Spain criticized him for the comedian as the MC. He said, in a year of crazy growth for women's sports, choosing an ESPY host who doesn't even try to make clever jokes about women athletes, he at least attempted to for men. He goes with hacky, no one knows the WNBA bit. Again, he proved that nobody knew the WNBA by them applauding the woman who wasn't a WNBA player. But I understand you don't get comedy. I understand that you don't get the jokes. It doesn't matter he wasn't being racist or sexist. He was being provocative. He was being a comedian. And yet, these ex-ESPN talking heads are coming after him. Another one, radio host Dan Le Batard, who used to be on ESPN, he was offended by it, suggesting that one of his jokes was offensive to gay people. Of course, Gillis, he went after everything. Jeffrey Epstein, Megan Rapinoe, who, Lord help us, there's a lot you could make fun of Megan Rapinoe for, but apparently the joke he had was one in which he went after New York Knicks player Karl Anthony Towns, who apparently is mocked on social media for what some claim is an effeminate sounding voice. I don't know. I'm not as familiar. Like I said, not a big NBA fan either. Said after referencing the Knicks run, Gillis said, Karl Anthony Towns is here. And then he flamboyantly shouted, "Hey, girl." And apparently that's enough for Le Batard to get annoyed with, saying that the point is to just stand on stage, on the edge, be provocative, just to provoke. He asked, how did that make gay people feel? How does that make Karl Anthony Towns feel? Well, Le Batard, I hate to break it to you, but his goal was to make people laugh. And it wasn't necessarily to worry about feelings in the moment. That's part of good comedy. But that's goes further to show how weak-minded the left is. Again, they want to be champions of tolerance, but they can't be tolerant of views that are different than them. They can't be tolerant of a comedian that is willing to go after everything. I don't see any of them being critical of any of the jokes he made about Donald Trump. I don't see any of them being critical about any of the jokes he made about, well, I have seen some be critical of a joke he made about Caitlin Clark, but I think it was for other reasons than he made fun of Caitlin Clark. It's crazy that here we are, and this is where we're at. It's crazy that this continues to be what is the norm in the mainstream media. It's insane to me that they continue to push this stuff left and right. They will continue to try to push the narrative that WNBA is popular. Because again, if you go Google it and you look up anything, you can find plain as day that it has never turned a profit. But Google will then send you that reminder through their AI stuff where it says, while the league has seen rising revenues and increased attendance and viewership, it's still heavily. So again, you want to put the excuse in that rise in viewership and increased attendance because you're trying to spin it. You're trying to spin it that it's in a better place than it is. A loss is a loss, and I'm sorry if they lost upwards of $50 million last year, then I hate to break it to you. That's not increased interest, people. That's only sustainable when you've got a much more global brand in the NBA pumping money in your coffers to save you. That's the only reason why that league still exists. It's going to be interesting to see the next couple of days how this all plays out for them. I think Gillis is going to be just fine. I think he's probably going to get a spike in folks trying to seek out his content on YouTube or Netflix or wherever you can find Shane Gillis stand-up routines. I think folks are going to seek it out. I found it to be pretty funny. It was entertaining. Probably was the only entertaining part of the self-congratulatory ESPYs show. But, of course, the left hates it because, again, they hate anything that might skewer them in any way, shape, or form. Would have been okay if he'd just gone off on Trump, but the fact that they were included, now he's terrible. He's a problem. Let's pause right here for a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors. All right, guys, welcome back here to Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network. Of course, if you're just tuning in, Jack Fairchild's filling in, flying solo for Chris McDaniel today, who is out again, working, busy schedule. Hope to have him back soon. If you're just tuning in, we've been talking about liberalism in sports. And I have used the WNBA as a heavy backdrop, but there are other things that we've seen, and one of the most notorious is these mascot changes. Whether it was the Washington Redskins changing to the Washington Commanders, or the Cleveland Indians deciding they got to drop the Indians moniker and become the Guardians. That is another liberal push. Most of the fans, most of the folks, even the Native Americans, didn't mind those monikers. Matter of fact, there are some Native American groups out there that have fought, at least on the side of the Redskins, have fought to see that one come back. But again, the liberal narrative was these were derogatory. They were harmful. And that was the narrative that we saw ESPN and other outlets continue to push until these teams caved. We'd already seen different colleges cave from Native American mascots. Because you go around and you look at a lot of schools that have Warhawk in their name. I can promise you they weren't always Warhawks. But that's liberalism. They come in and they creep in. ESPN clubs you over the head with why this is terrible, why this is a bad thing and a bad look for the league. And next thing you know, the league is trying to put pressure on to the play because they're listening to these talking heads. They're not listening to popular opinion. Because I think most Cleveland Indian fans, most baseball fans, would have preferred to keep Chief Wahoo and the Indians. Most Redskins fans wanted to keep the moniker of Redskins. They did not want to see it change. And then when it does change, it got changed to the most generic thing possible in Commanders. They really don't like it. Donald Trump, of course, he has weighed in on that as he is imploring the owners of NFL's Washington Commanders and Major League Baseball's Cleveland Guardians to revert to the organization's old nicknames. He put this out on a social media post in which he is, I'm trying to find his post right now. He says the Washington whatevers should immediately change their names back to Washington Redskin football team. There's a big clamoring for this. Likewise, the Cleveland Indians, one of the 6 original baseball teams with a storied past, are great Indian people, and massive numbers want this to happen. Their heritage and prestige is systematically being taken away from them. Times are different now than they were 3 or 4 years ago. We are a country of passion and common sense. Owners, get over it. And again, it's not just the owners. It's the league, especially in the case of both the Indians and the Redskins. They were really pushing those organizations to change their mascots, and they caved to the pressure. They caved to the pressure, and the pressure was coming to them from sports media outlets like ESPN. Those outlets were pushing this narrative and pushing this idea that these names were offensive, that these names were the worst thing imaginable. They were harming. And that Native Americans in large numbers were put. Look, I can't verify Donald Trump's claim that the narrative that the majority of Native Americans want it back. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't have numbers in front of me, but that's the claim he made. But I don't think the majority of them were offended by it. At least in very unscientific conversations I've had with Native Americans in our area and I've spoken with, they didn't have a problem with any of it. It was liberal white people that had the problem with it and created this narrative that they were offensive and had to go. It's the same folks now that are shouting that Shane Gillis is a bigot because he skewered people as part of his comedy routine in a usually stiff and dull awards show. Again, that's where the left is. Where's the tolerance? Again, it's the same left-leaning media that every time there is a new female play-by-play or color commentator, that if fans don't immediately just jump on it and love her, that it must be that they're sexist. It can't be that they have a preference. Maybe if they're watching a baseball game, they prefer male voices to be the one talking about it. Maybe they are one of those that prefer it to be former athletes, folks who played the game. I don't know. Or maybe, in some instances, it's just the female commentator is not good. But you're not allowed to say that. You can't say that she's a bad commentator because then you're sexist. It can't be that you have an opinion. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to like her just because I don't. And if the vast majority of people don't like it, then get her off. Get her off the show. Because guess what? She's not helping you. But instead, they will try to shame people by saying, well, everyone that dislikes her is just sexist. It's false, people. We have preferences. We have preferences in how we want to be entertained. We have preferences in different elements of sports. And this is no different. This is no different, people. But again, when the left is controlling the entire narrative through the media, now through the sports media, it's why we have these issues in the first place. It's why we continue to see this type of ridiculousness pushed down our throats. I just don't understand why we can't see through the nonsense, why we can't see through the lies that they're putting forth, because it's not hard. We can 100% see firsthand the truth. Look, if females are watching the WNBA and are doing it in record numbers, and they don't like a male commentator because they want it to be commentated from a female perspective, since nobody would bat an eye if they said that. Nobody would bat an eye at a woman saying that she thinks that all the commentators for female sports should be women. Nobody bat an eye at it. She's their catered to audience for the most part. And yet, when a man says something like, I really don't like female commentators on male sports, he just instantly gets labeled a sexist. It's fascinating when you break down the double standards and you look at that. It is what it is, people. It is what it is. But again, and don't get me wrong, there are several female commentators out there that are pretty good at their jobs. But if I have a preference to want to have that information fed to me in a different manner, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm sexist. Or if said female commentator is not one of the good ones and one of the bad ones, I should be allowed to say that. She's terrible at her job without getting slapped in the face with the sexism accusation. But that's where we are in politics today. Speaking of politics, let's switch gears real quick before we get done with this particular episode. I'm sure most of you guys saw Stephen Colbert, the CBS host of Late Show. You know, the show that was made popular by David Letterman, launched for David Letterman. They even gave him the famous Ed Sullivan Theater there in New York. Stephen Colbert followed him, and of course he came in on the popularity of his right-wing skewer show on Comedy Central, The Colbert Report. Most folks, even though Stephen Colbert was an acquired taste for the most part, and he was very left-leaning, most folks thought he might be a good fit. Matter of fact, when he first started, he said he was not bringing the political character over to The Late Show. He was just going to be his true self. Well, we later found out we don't like his true self because he is a left-wing lunatic. I mean, he just constantly couldn't help himself. Instead of having movie stars on to talk about the big summer blockbuster, he would have Democrat senators and congresspeople on to help promote liberalism. Every night was another assault on Donald Trump, on Republicans. His guests always seemed to skew more political than entertainment. And apparently, he is now going to be out of a job. He's going to be fired at the end of next season. Now, he still has a job through May of 2026. They're not canceling the Late Show right away, so don't get too excited. We still have to wait through his whole farewell tour because they're gonna blow a big to-do about it. Oh, Stephen, he was so great. He wasn't. I read one report that claims that the Late Show lost CBS $40 million last year. Look, it took the WNBA an entire league to cost them $50 million. Stephen Colbert did this with one show, apparently. It's crazy when you think about it. Of course, the left is already going out there and attacking CBS for this cancelization. Because that's what they do. Oh, how dare they? They're canceling because of politics. Well, yeah, because people didn't want to watch that in their late night space. They didn't want to watch a show that they could see on MSNBC when they had a late night show. I don't know how many of our audience are old enough to remember the old Johnny Carson Tonight Show. Johnny Carson, if he had political guests on, it was from both sides of the equation. He made fun of both sides. He wasn't anti one, anti the other. He wasn't pro one, he wasn't pro the other. He was down the middle. But for the most part, his Tonight shows mainly consisted of guests from the entertainment industry. And that's what people grew accustomed. That's what they wanted to see in their late night television. They didn't want to see political deep dives. There's a reason why people have turned off late night television in droves. Not just Stephen Colbert, but that insufferable bore Jimmy Kimmel. Even the Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon, who is not as bad as the others, he still pushes his politics more than the entertainment side of it. That's why these shows are starting to struggle and why people have tuned them out. Stephen Colbert, because of all of his talent and how funny he can be, people thought he was a slam dunk replacement for David Letterman, and he wasn't. He wasn't. He's now going to be leaving CBS. He's probably destined to go to MSNBC and co-host a show with another liberal nightmare, Keith Olbermann. I can see the two of them pairing. Can you imagine that show? That show would probably last only a week because the two of them would probably try to kill one another over who's more liberal than the other one. I don't think anybody can out-liberal Keith Olbermann anyway, and based on the way he talks to just anyone, I wouldn't want to be in the same room with him. I can promise you this, if he ever talked to me the way that he talks to other folks, to my face, yeah, Keith, it probably wouldn't work out well for you. Just leave it at that. But Colbert, I'm sure, like I said, MSNBC is lining up to get their hands on this guy. He'd be a hit for that ratings challenge network. Speaking of, one being propped up from welfare from someone else, NBC Network has to be propping up MSNBC because their ratings are terrible. Shoot, they'd probably kill to get some WNBA ratings on MSNBC. But yeah, so Stephen Colbert, out of work at the end of next year. Of course, in the ultimate insult to David Letterman, in my opinion, CBS said that they're not replacing Stephen Colbert as host. They're just going to retire the Late Show flat out because Stephen Colbert is irreplaceable. But David Letterman, the guy who created that show and actually was entertaining on that show, he was replaceable because you brought in Stephen Colbert to replace him. But whatever. More news, folks. Barak Obama. former president of the United States. You guys remember that guy. He's back in the news. He apparently went on his wife and his brother-in-law's podcast, and he called out progressives for their mistake of constantly talking about what boys are doing wrong rather than talking about what they're doing right. Appearing as the guest on on that show, the former president argued that mistakes occurred because progressives were hyper-focused on ensuring there is a level playing field for girls, which has led to boys' flaws being put under a microscope. I think he's onto something here. He says, I will say, as a quote-unquote progressive, Democrats, progressive parents, and enlightened ones, we've made that mistake sometimes in terms of our rhetoric, where it's like we're constantly talking about it. You know, what's going on with boys instead of what's right with them. Obama continued by explaining his reasoning for why many progressives have overlooked what boys have been doing right. He says, we rightly have tried to invest in girls to make sure that there is a level playing field. Really? Have y'all? Because aren't y'all progressives the one trying to take away their opportunities and give it to boys pretending to be girls? Anyway. You know, when you see hypocrisy, you have to call it out. It says we have to make sure that girls have a level playing field and they're not barred from their opportunities. It even gets better when you finish the quote because they're barred from their opportunities that you're giving it to biological males. But anyway, but we haven't been as willing, I think, to be intentional about investing in the boys. And that's a mistake, and I think people are starting to recognize that. So again, he's right in one sense, because again, he talks about all the, and that's something that we see the left do. Because again, if you do something that has been traditional norm for a boy, you criticize for it. Toxic masculinity, whatever the case, criticized for it. And they have, in essence, taught several men that they probably don't want to be a traditional male. They continue to attack that. I don't think that's going to change because Obama said it or anything like that. It's crazy when you're watching them have these revelations and understanding certain things. But then you see where they continued on, because if Barack Obama had just stopped there, you'd be like, okay, he said something I can agree with. Yeah, there's a little bit of hypocrisy sprinkled in there, but I can agree with it. But he didn't stop there because he went further, because Obama encouraged men to have gay friends to teach their boys empathy and be role models. Yeah, the former president discussed raising emotionally intelligent young men and why boys need male figures other than their fathers in their lives. You know, Paul's right there. Some young males just need their father in their lives, because there's several that don't have their dad in their life. But, you know, he recalled how he enjoyed visiting Michelle at her house when they were dating and seeing a variety of male relatives in her family that each demonstrated masculinity in their own ways. He said, and that's one of the things I think a lot of boys need, is not just exposure to one guy, one dad. No matter how good the dad, he can't be everything. And that boy may need somebody to give the boy a perspective on the dad, right? Again, let's dissect that. Now, I don't disagree that young boys need other male figures in their life beside their father. I was blessed in the fact that my father would bring me to his deer camp, bring me to his lodge, bring me to different areas to where I knew my dad's friends. And many of them, to this day, if they're still with us, I consider friends of mine now. whether it was Uncle Roy, Uncle Pete, Uncle Sonny, whoever it was, there were multiple folks that I could remember that Dad threw that moniker uncle in front of, even though they were not my dad's blood relative. They were very much family. And I grew up with them in my life, and they went on to become my friends as well. So I don't disagree on the sentiment that, and I think most good dads do that anyway. They integrate, but he couldn't just leave it there. Similar to the one I talked about a second ago. If he had just left it right there, people would be okay with comment. He went further because he talked about how one of his favorite professors in college was openly gay and would call him out for saying stuff that was ignorant when he first started the class. Yeah, the ex-president argued that men need members of the alphabet mafia as friends to model kindness and empathy and to be role models to their own kids who may come out as gay or non-binary, which non-binary doesn't exist, by the way, people. It's a made-up term by the left. But he says you need that to show empathy and kindness. And by the way, you need a person in your friends group so that if you have a boy who is gay or non-binary or whatever, they have somebody they can go, okay, I'm not alone in this, right? Look, no, they don't. You don't have to. New dads, I'm talking to you specifically. If you got a gay friend, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to go out and seek one, because I can assure you can instill your values the way that you can. If your child chooses that path, you'll figure it out how you want to handle it. Because one thing I know, I don't have any kids, but one thing I do know from my friends that have kids, that even if they disagree with their child, even if their child chooses a path that they cannot fully support, good dads, that love doesn't go away because they made a bad choice. It's just the truth. But this notion that we all need a gay buddy is 100% false there by Barack Obama. It's not something that is needed. It is not something that a dad has to go out and seek, because again, it's your son. You're going to figure out how to raise him. It doesn't matter if I agree with it. It doesn't matter if someone else disagrees. You're going to figure out your methods. And it doesn't have to be the methodology that Barack Obama's pointing out, because I just don't. And that's the other thing. You know, again, if you turn on television, nowadays sitcoms aren't realistic because everyone's got to have that one gay friend. And I'm sorry, but that just isn't the way the world works. I'm not saying you don't have gay friends, but they're not usually, if you're a group of males, in your inner circle. If they are, more power to you. But that's not as common as television would have you think. Again, they try to spoon feed this stuff down. But, you know, Barack Obama's trying to push that the left needs to figure out a way to go back to courting young males to their side of the fence. Courting, and they need to, but is it going to work? Especially when they have very recent evidence of you telling them that they're not good and that they don't matter. Is it going to work when you can look down and see how many different times you have attacked and gone after them merely for acting like a traditional male? The left and their hypocrisy is something that can be studied for a long time. Because again, they go down these tangents. You take this whole thing, and again, I've talked about it on the right side. I've talked about it on last week's Chris McDaniel's America, this whole outcry for the Epstein list, which count me as one of the ones who thinks that Trump made a major mistake in the way they've been handling this. Major mistake. The fact that They told us they were going to be transparent. They were going to push out this list. And now all of a sudden, the list never existed. Even though the Attorney General told us it was on her desk at one point. But it never existed. So the frustration that people are having when it comes around that is real. Now we get to the hypocrisy of the left, because now you see Democrats who have never spoken out and wanting to see the Epstein list released, now saying, we need to release the list, whether it's AOC or others. We're now screaming they want to see the list released. Well, now it's different because, again, it makes Donald Trump look bad. It's a problem Trump created himself. No sympathy there. No sympathy whatsoever. But now the left is trying to seize on it. They're going to try to utilize this. But they don't really want to see it released either. They don't want that Epstein list to come out either. And it's the same reason the Republicans don't want to see it come out. They don't want to see it come out because each side has friends on that list. That's the truth. Each side has people tied to their party on that list. Jeffrey Epstein courted both sides. He didn't just go after Democrats. He didn't just go after Republicans. And because of that, that's the reason why I predict we'll never see a true client list. It was a bad look for Trump and his administration when they came out and said it didn't exist, though. And it is a colossal mistake because it's not one of those things that people want to let go. It's one of those issues. And again, when you promise full transparency, when you run on the notion that you are going to be the most transparent administration ever, it makes sense that you don't run from it. Not to, and to some of you who think that we should just be blindly loyal because it's Donald Trump and his administration, stop. Because again, we should hold Donald Trump to the same standards we want to hold all leaders to. The promise was made of full transparency. Make good on the promise. But that proves the hypocrisy there of the modern American left, because they continue. Now all of a sudden, they're the ones verbalizing they want to see the Epstein list. Whether it's creeping in through sports or Barack Obama trying to tell you that you need to introduce your children to a gay friend, you just constantly see the insanity of the left. You constantly see just how loony these characters are. Because they are pretty loony. The fact that Shane Gillis, the comedian, is being skewered by the left. Look, if you aren't familiar with Shane Gillis, if you go and look him up, I can promise you, from what I've seen of the guy, he doesn't care. He doesn't care that they're coming after him. Matter of fact, he'll double down on it. He made an entire joke out of the fact that Saturday Night Live fired him. Made an entire joke out of it. And has since been invited on the show twice. So I don't think Gillis cares too much. But it's part of the reason why we talk about it and bring this stuff to light is so that way you can be more informed. That way when you're watching SportsCenter with your family and you hear something that sounds like it might be more politically charged than what you want to watch in your sports content. You're aware it's coming. You're aware that it's happening. You're aware that the left is utilizing your escape to help further their agenda, their narrative. Because they know you're not going to change the channel off of your favorite sports team. They know that. And they will utilize that against you because they get it. It's frustrating people for sure. Next week, hopefully we'll have Chris back. Hopefully we'll get back into the traditional slot there on Thursday. I think that's the plan, whether we have Chris or not. I think that's our plan, is to go ahead and have something out on Thursday, whether it's me and guest host or not. But we definitely, are committed to keeping our show going. So be sure to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube page. Go ahead and follow us on whichever social media account you're watching us on. That way you'll see whenever there's a new episode coming out. You can stay informed. Guys, this has been Chris McDaniel's America. I'm your host, Jack Fairchilds, and we're a part of the Midnight Ride Network, your home for the anti-establishment movement. We'll see you again next week.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.